Hi there, and welcome on the journey to transform culture. I'm Steve, and I'll be your guide. Well, folks, I hope you're having a fantastic day and an even better week. Folks, this video will mark the 200th video that I put together, essentially after putting out the book about a year and some change ago. This YouTube channel has also been put together to help transform culture, but not just organizational culture, but to help in our overall transformation, right? Individually, as team members, part of organizations, doesn't matter if those also go into the civic side of the community, your churches, it doesn't matter where, wherever we assemble, if we can look toward transforming for the better to be able to realize growing and thriving lives, then it's a benefit. And because some of the videos are a little bit longer, I understand, I acknowledge that. I too do like some brief videos, but at times what I've also found is when I've watched lengthier videos that it necessarily wasn't from the beginning of the video or the end necessarily, but in the middle of the content where I found nuggets of wisdom or insight or perspective, right? Just a different perspective on something that I may have already known about even. So hopefully you can find similar value connecting the dots in these videos as well as this one for your own use, right? That being said, on the main page of my YouTube channel, also there's a way for you to contribute toward the channel if you're using these for lunch and learns or your own development. I put these together in such a way that in a conversational way, rather than just a stiff and dry presentation like you would get, say, in a not knocking the classroom. We've all been there, but a little more casual conversation, right? I wanted this to be a little more conversational, and as I go forward with this channel, it will continue to have a conversational tone. At no point am I lecturing anyone on you should do this or else, right? This is all about, just like I say in the book, it's about protecting love. What do we do to protect love? If we're doing the right things, then love is protected in our lives through everyone that, we communicate with, engage with, and connect with, right? And that's important. And we're also narrowing in on Christmas. So, I want to wish everybody a Merry Christmas and preemptive Happy New Year, right? I may get out another few videos before that, but we'll see. But today, I want to jump into breaking down something that's been around since ancient times. It doesn't matter what religions going back. It doesn't matter what cultures going back thousands of years. This breakdown of this concept has been around for a long time. It is not mine. I did not invent this, but I'm going to give a bit of a take on it from the individual, the team, and the organizational, from a lens looking at those, right? So that we can kind of understand ourselves better, understand our team better, understand some of those, inner dynamics that are going on, as well as for organizations to understand, what personality that has as well, right? That with the end goal of providing an opportunity for everyone to get better, right? Get better and grow. So without further ado, let's get started. Today, we're talking about the creator, the sustainer, and the destroyer. I know, it sounds pretty intense, right? But if we look at this from the individual level, right, from the person level of us as people, right, we can essentially, and this is actually really cool because it simplifies in a way for us to filter things for ourselves internally and externally, right? So this is the person, internal and external. But it provides a way for us to understand and kind of use this as a metric or a compass, right? to check ourselves, like the old saying goes, check yourself before you wreck yourself. This is a good tool to prevent you from wrecking yourself. Okay, your teams and organizations. But from the person perspective, from the perspective of us as people, let's look at first the creator. You think about this when we're growing up, we're kids, we're learning, we're growing, we're developing, and then as we go, you know, play is a significant part of our lives. And that is essentially where we begin to create, right? We have some imagination, make believe. We may act out professions. I might be a doctor, whatever it is. I might be an adventurer, an archaeologist. Pick one, right? But whatever your imagination threw at you, you learned how to play. You were a creator. This is the beginnings of that. We draw. We in school, and as we were developing, we learning to draw or trying to draw. In my case, I wasn't a great artist, but with color and all the, as you can tell, right? With colors and then making paper airplanes was another thing I used to love to do. Just some of the examples. Paper airplanes. It could be all the different things that we did up and coming as young people, and we kind of learned to create. We weren't really into sustaining yet, but as we grew, we got a little bit older, we learned the rules of the road, so to speak, and our parents were saying, okay, you can do this and you can't do this, right? Or can't do this. The cans and the can'ts, right? And this is where we practiced, becoming adults, right? Can I follow instructions? Can I, do what I was told, by my parents to do, and then, of course, not do. And, of course, when that goes sideways, right, then we have a little learning curve there as well, right? To where we're trying to figure it out as we go. Now, the other part of this is when we're young, very few times do people actually, I would say less common, is the motif of the destroyer really relevant when we're young. But there are examples of this, right? The bully, right? The bully is a destroyer. That's an example of a destroyer. It may not have been a bully. It might have been somebody playing what they thought was a practical joke, but they may have hurt somebody's feelings, right? We've all done that as a kid, done something we thought was fun and funny, and maybe hurt somebody's feelings, right? In that moment, we kind of got the taste of what it felt like to be the destroyer. You build a cool sandcastle and somebody comes and stomps right on it, thinking, aha, or whatever. And somebody worked, for hours to build this thing, whatever it is, right? Pick your thing. So we get little tastes of being the destroyer. Obviously, in our culture, there are examples where this is really hard hitting and real. Those are actual destructive things that are permanent and not good. But for the general, mass of us out there, the destroyer, being the destroyer, we get a taste of that and we figure out what that is, and then we typically don't want to be the destroyer in anybody else's life. Typically, hopefully you're not that, because ultimately, if you enjoyed being the destroyer as a kid and you turned into an adult who like to be the destroyer, these are our narcissists right here, right? This is where they permanently reside for the most part. But as adults, when we go out and we're doing our thing, we can essentially look at ourselves and say, okay, how am I in the world, right? If I've got kind of a sideways attitude right now, and I'm not feeling necessarily cooperative, right? I'm not innovating, right? I'm not collaborating. I'm not maybe resisting that. That creator mode is really a high-minded mode, right? And there are times when we get bored and we're not enthusiastic, we're not into whatever's going on, and we may just be sustaining. I'm just trying to get through the day. The creator, no, we're going after it. We're trying to create something. We're creating something. It's kind of a form of alchemy, really. It might even be engaging with other people. That can also be a form of creation as well. But sustaining, we're not into it. We're not really buying it, right? We're kind of a holdout. We're not a full holdout, but we are definitely not. We're not really leaning into creator mode. We're not leaning into being our best. Let's put it that way. And then, of course, destroyer. This is your holdout. Okay. Now, this doesn't. I'm not saying, because I did say earlier that our narcissists live here. Others can live here too. Okay. This can be your holdouts as well, and it can be folks who basically are your cynics. Right. They're cynical. They can be negative. Right. They can be pessimistic. Right. And they're essentially, they're not playing with the group, basically, even more so than the sustainer mode would be. So, but a person externally, how we act in the world, we can really measure it by, am I being a creator right now? Even in a relationship, am I being a creator? Am I being a sustainer? Am I just getting through the moment, getting through the day? Am I just putting up with something rather than jumping in to make sure that I have a hand in a voice to be heard, to be a creator, right? Externally, the people who are not making themselves heard, say in the workplace or anywhere in culture, they're just going along with the crowd. There's a lot of folks like this, right? And they go along, just going along to get along, right? I have been here before many times. I've actually spent a lot of time in both of these two categories of creator and sustainer. And what I was an only child. So as a child amongst adults, do you think you're going to be heard? Probably not, right? It doesn't mean you don't learn and pick up things and all, right? But do you think that they're really interested to poll you for your opinion about something that is clearly something I probably am not aware of? Probably not, right? So you kind of fall naturally into the sustainer mode, and some of you, maybe growing up, maybe fell into that sustainer mode too, right? You're the giver. The giver can be here. Hey, I can pitch in and help, but I'm not always heard, right? That sort of thing. But as we develop and hopefully we grow through some of these things, we can then find our voice and we start to find success, and the creator aspect of us starts to come to light. For me, it was sports. Sports allowed me to be creative, and then my voice came, and then you see where sustaining isn't good enough. You start to see where the idea of winning, but then of course that's a broad topic, right? The concept of winning is a broad brush, but you might find purpose, right? The person who's in creator mode finds purpose in what they're doing. They're not bored because they're definitely leaning into, hey, I'm living for my passion, right? But there's the external and how we live, but then there's also the internal. How are you feeling? How do you feel on the inside? Do you feel like the creator? Do you feel like people are telling you to kind of shut up and color right here in the sustainer mode? The sustainer isn't really putting up an argument. It's too tiring to argue with you, so I'm just not going to bother, right? And it doesn't say you want to argue with folks, but I'm not going to iron this out or get to resolution because it's just not worth my time. You've been playing the sustainer role, and so you may think, well, my voice isn't valued, so therefore I don't really care to participate. That's where those folks live, in the sustainer role. And sadly, a lot of folks, individuals like that in organizations, are in this category. The destroyer, obviously, you said the narcissist, but the gaslighters, right? The holdouts, the cynic, the pessimist, right? The one who's going to kind of poo-poo ideas and that sort of thing. But internally, you have to kind of measure where are you at, because somebody might say, hey, what's going on? And you might stop and reflect. Okay, you can ask yourself this question. Am I being the creator, right? Am I in creator mode? Am I in a cooperative mode? Am I in am I cooperating? Am I innovating? Am I collaborating? Am I negotiating for wins for everybody, right? Or am I withdrawing? Am I not participating and I'm withdrawing? Or am I trying to usurp others, right? Do I feel this way? You can ask this internally of yourself. You might feel like you're not in line with the rest of the group, and you can ask yourself, okay, how am I feeling? Because individually, we could have, if you have, 50 to 100 people where you are in your organization or whatever you're involved with, you can have people who are operating from different capacities, right? coming at life from many different angles. Some are trying to collaborate and innovate and work together and negotiate, resolutions and find breakthrough. And then there are those who are just like, I'm just here for a paycheck. That's the other thing about the sustainer. They get bored, they're here for a paycheck, right? The destroyer, they're not just here for a paycheck, but they're kind of at war. And now keep in mind too, this isn't just, while we're talking about the person, this can also be the leader, right? The leaders can be any one of these too. It doesn't have to be just a peer or a team member. If the leader is a creator, great. If they're a sustainer, well, they're probably not helping your organization and there's not a lot of growth, and they don't really care about new ideas because that means they have to do something about it. They're kind of just going along to get along as well. They're just there for the paycheck. But the destroyer now, if it's the leader, the destroyer, now they're allowing office politics to flourish. That's this stuff, right? That's this stuff. They're allowing that to flourish. They're not, they're not zeroing in on toxic behavior, right? And that allows the destructive, nature of the destroyer. And there may be a few. You may have, I say the destroyer, but it could be that you have 7 or 8 people that are a destroyer in an organization of 100. Okay, that is a lot of people who are, doing office politics, usurping maybe, the team's best interest and the customer's best interest, all of that. So we have to be aware of this. But we can ask ourselves, kind of like an internal compass, right now, what am I? Am I feeling like, am I the creator? Am I in a collaborative mode and all that? Or am I just trying to get through the day? You could think of this as a Monday for most people. Most people, I just want to survive Monday. But the creator, I can't wait because I want to do this, this, and this. And while they may have moments of the sustainer aspect of them, by and large, they want to leave at the end of the day having accomplished something, right? Accomplished something that they're proud of, right? The destroyer, they don't care. I want to get paid, and I'm going to do the least amount of work possible, right? And leaders can fall into this category too. I want to get paid, and I want to engage as little as possible with the team. And by default, that becomes destructive, right? So that's just an idea on the person, the aspect of a person being the creator, the sustainer, destroyer. We want to have healthy, thriving lives, but it's going to be difficult for us to have that. It's one thing to oscillate a little bit between these two, but it's very difficult if you're oscillating here or you're just here, right? That's dangerous. All right. Let me clean the board up and then we'll continue. So now let's talk about the team. So with the team, we kind of set up the person going through their history. We don't have to go through the history. Now we've come together as a team, but one of the things I wanted to highlight was there's a video I did with forming, storming, norming, and performing. This is how these would most align for a team. If we can see that, it's performing. Okay, so forming is essentially the team comes together. Storming is really in the destroyer stage. And I only say that because that's when you have the most holdouts. We haven't aligned. We're a fragmented mess, really. And we're still trying to figure it out as a team. And then, of course, as we do figure it out, we move into the norming stage. And now we're sustaining. We're handling the customer's business, but we don't really have it all pinned to the ground pretty tightly, right? And then as we do get our act together and we are operating from a proactive versus reactive, right? You can say that all of this is reactive to here, and then this is proactive. If you're in creator mode, you're in performing mode, high performing mode. You are getting it done for the customer. You're proactive. You're doing the proper prior planning, right? You're doing all the necessary things as leaders. They're engaged, right? And so you're getting, and teams are all engaged. Everybody is engaged. Communication is not a challenge. But as a team, remember I said before, individuals can be in various states, right? And remember, those states, I forgot to mention this, those states can be different. You could go through a cycle through all of those within the course of an hour, right? Or at any time during your day. Okay, so you have to keep in mind, I use an example as a parent. The parent, does things, to get kids set up for success and provide healthy means of taking care of things. But then they're all in the creator mode. But then in the sustainer mode, they're setting boundaries, right? And expectations. Okay, that's but and not because they want to be bad, but the parent can also be a destroyer. If you've ever had a teenager, you're destroying my social life. That whole thing we've all heard, time on memoriam. But and while that isn't actually destroying anything, that's how it's received, right? So so a parent could actually be any one of these throughout an entire day, still with good intentions, but you can see how that can work. But back to the team. So the team comes together, they're a mess, they start getting their act together, they're being able to provide to the customer, but they're late, they still have turnover, there's still issues. This is very high turnover. This is the next level of turnover, and then this is very little turnover, right? This turnover rate, and you're in creator mode. If you're in creator mode as a team, you have so little turnover. So it's really important to understand these things. But you can also check yourselves as team members, right? So even though we're talking about the team, we're always going to be us, right? We're always going to be individuals on a team, right? So this is where you want honesty and transparency. Let's say I'm a little sideways and I'm really in sustainer mode and I'm really just kind of like, I'm not really feeling it. I'm not really, I'm not a holdout, but I'm just like, a little skeptical, right? And my teammates might maybe say, hey, it seems like you're a little bit in the sustainer mode, right? We can speak freely and relaxed about it and keep it simple in these three pockets. You seem like you're a little bit in the sustainer mode. And, not gaslighting you in saying this, but actually genuinely seeing this, right? Perceiving this. And say, really? Do I seem like that? No, I'm just pondering, this, that, because you may not be in sustainer mode. You may just be, more of an introvert. You may be thinking and pondering, and your intellectual brain is cycling and processing, right? It's okay to be in that, right? You don't have to be running around like crazy people to be in creator mode. In fact, if you're running around like a crazy person, you're probably more in here anyway. Okay, so because you're very busy, but you're not getting a lot done. Okay, but you still may be servicing customers, but you guys are putting out probably 25-30% more energy to do it because you're not set up well. But so a team essentially can identify itself and say, hey, and a leader of a team can also say, hey, folks, we want to be careful we don't fall into complacency. Sustainer mode is more about complacency, right? And this is also where, people are complacent, then they get bored, right? So this is where the leader of a team can also say and challenge the team, right? Challenge individuals and the team, actually, and challenge them so that they don't get complacent, so they don't get bored, so they don't feel unheard, right? And then what you will find is a good leader will pull people out of the sustainer mode into creator mode if they're given the proper challenge, in a productive way, right? What you don't want to do is you don't want to be, like I said before, you don't want to gaslight people and start, projecting onto them. It's like, hey, folks, I don't want us to slip in. You can say things like, hey, folks, I don't want us to slip into sustainer mode. So guard yourselves, right? And that could be just a general conversation with your team. But team members, too, you could actually start meetings and say, hey, folks, let's get into collaborator mode. Is everybody awake? All right, whatever. When I was in recruiting in the Air Force way back in the day, they started, one of the things we had to do is stand up and and do a thing at the beginning of our class and everything when we were going through that training. And they'd be yell out, "Boy, am I enthusiastic!" and and yell it out loud, right? Which felt really awkward because we're in a classroom and it's just not usual, right? But once you do it, you kind of snap yourself out of it, and it's kind of an icebreaker to kind of get your mojo moving, get the blood moving and a little spice in your day, right? The coffee can serve only so much, right? You'd have to bring a certain enthusiasm. That enthusiasm lives in creator mode. That creator mojo, if you will, in the creator mode doesn't live in I'm bored, I'm just getting through it. Yeah, I'm here, but don't I'm a moth on the wall. Don't bother me, right? That's you don't want to be in that, right? You don't want to be bored. You don't want to be status quo. You don't want to be I'm just here for a paycheck, because if that's the case, then you're not in alignment with your team, right? And it might be that your team hasn't gotten to this state, so it may be that your whole team's out of alignment, I guess, is the bottom line. And you want to get your entire team in the creator mode. Now, this isn't to say you don't want some folks to have a critical eye, and because you don't want to fall into confirmation bias and all these things, right? You don't want to be just a yes person on the team, right? But you also don't want to be just constantly in the pessimistic, uh, low hope, low possibility mode either, right? You don't want to be living down here. You might bounce off of this, and we're humans. We're not. Let me tell you, you're not always going to be full 110% all the time. But when you get into sustainer mode, it should be to get the things done that need to be done. But you also need to keep a sharp eye that you don't fall into complacency, because to improve, right, to transform and to improve means you really have to have one eye on being in the creator mode and maybe one eye or a toe in sustainer mode, right? That way you can get things done. But you do want to be cautious about the destroyer mode, okay? And don't get it twisted either, because you are not on board, right? So let's say it's a new project and you're not fully on board. That doesn't mean, and this goes for leaders too, that we don't want to gaslight our team, right? We don't want to say, "Oh, well, if you're not on board, you must be in destroyer mode." That's not true. You're not in destroyer mode, but you may be in destroyer mode if it's not about having a critical eye for the greater good, right? The greater good in the situation is going to win the day. What's the greater good for our customers, right? Some will be in the destroyer mode because it's an I, me, not we scenario in their organization. They're looking out for, well, I'm going to have to do a little bit more here to make this happen. This is putting more workload on me. Well, just because you have more workload doesn't mean that this idea is bad, right? It just means you have a challenge now to go into creator mode to figure out how to load level your day or your workload, right? And it may be that you have to do some other things to make all these pieces fit. There's a bit of a puzzle aspect to this, but we don't shoot something down because it's adding a little bit more draw on the energy and capacity of my day. Now, if it's significant, then you need to make a cogent argument as to why this isn't going to work at this juncture, and maybe come up with a solution to how it could work, right? But you don't want to dive into being the destroyer just because your personal needs are, or your personal, norms of the day are not going to continue to be the same. There may be a higher workload. There may be more adjustments to be made. We've all been there where we've had to be flexible in situations. That doesn't give us permission to go in destroyer mode. We can feel like it on the inside, and that's why the internal and external is there. To recognize that you can go through all of these internally, but you definitely don't want to stay in destroyer mode, because the next thing that's going to happen is you're going to miss something on the external, and then some product or service or an activity, a task, you name it, something is going to go sideways, and then you're going to, hurt customers figuratively and literally down the line. And you're going to hurt your team. So you don't want to fall into that trap to get pulled into that. This just gives you an idea about the team. Now let me talk briefly about organizations. Okay, so now let's talk about organizations. So in organizations, you can have creator mode, sustainer, and destroyer mode. Okay, organizations, think of this as when we're thinking internal and external, think of it in relation to customers. Okay, customers. So internally, an organization is in creator mode when they're providing resources, right? Developing their team, they're providing opportunities to collaborate. They're doing all the proper prior planning, right? Voices are heard, ideas are heard, good programs are in place. You pump it on all cylinders. You're engaging with your team. You're doing your daily management walks, all the good things. You're in creator mode internally. That is fantastic. That's where you want to be. That's the creme de la creme. When you do that, you essentially are creating, you have a healthy organizational culture. Only healthy organizational cultures are going to be in creator mode. Okay, this is also best in class. So if you were to look at this, this would be your best in class, best, right? This would be probably your maybe 75 to 80 performers, and then this would be below 75, right? Below 75. But so internally, if you're doing all the right things for your team, for all the employees, leader, everybody, you're doing all the right things and you got a good system in place, that's fantastic. And sustainment is more likely over a long period. And there's a bit of a perpetual motion to it. Remember, every time you lose or gain somebody on your team, and remember, some people can, move on because they get promoted into other jobs, and good for good reasons, right? Not because I'm leaving, or hey, we're laying off 10% of the workforce. But the other things, the good things, promotions, or maybe they're moving across country because of family stuff, whatever, positive stuff in life. So turnover for organizations in creator mode internally is going to be so low, right? That's why I say best in class. It's going to be so low. Organizations in sustainer mode, this is where employees are bored. This is where a lot of, you're going to have safety incidents pop up. You're going to have, that complacency. You're going to have problems with your product, right? The quality. Could have defects, a lot of returns. Right, so you're kind of you're getting kicked in the tail because you're not able to kind of make the leap into the creator mode, and because of and this can be driven by the team, by the leaders, it can be driven by everybody. This is a we effort, not a me effort. This isn't one person, not one leader, not any one team member. This is a team, entire organizational effort. So if you're in this mode as an organization, you got there because of the ownership, because of leadership, and because of the broader team, at the site level. You got there because of everybody, not because of one or another. But if you get into this mode, right, this is not good. And so what do you have to do? You have to start doing all the right things, all the good things that leaders and teams need to do, right? The communication, all the good stuff, right? To be able to get the work done and be consistent, be proactive, not reactive. Here, you're reacting because you got a lot of issues, okay? And you have to start knocking those issues out. This is where transformation and continuous improvement here massively needed. And this is also another reason why there's $5.5 trillion of waste in the U.S. Trillion. Say that out loud. Trillion. $5.5 trillion of waste. It's because of this, folks. It's because of organizations, teams, leaders, owners who are not doing all the appropriate things they need to get things done in the appropriate way to build and develop their teams because they shy away from doing everything to the level that they need to. And because they're behind the eight ball a little bit, because they're trying to get better, but their standards aren't high enough. Because their standards aren't high enough, they're bringing team members on whose standards are also low. This can also happen if you have a site level leadership who's always hiring people whose standards aren't high enough, so they constantly have a scapegoat. Okay, this is the dark side of organizations, but where they constantly have a scapegoat, so that the leader and the support staff are never that's never part of the focus, right? And by the time it is, you've already cycled through so many people at the workforce level, the team level, that by the time that leader leaves, the reputation at that site is just decimated. Even the local community, nobody wants to touch them with a 10-foot pole. This is where transformation, this is where people will bring me in, for example, and say, hey, we need to turn this thing around. Can you help us out? And then we come in and start to optimize your organization, start working and building on your team and build those leaders in your organization up. So this is where it's drastically needed, but this is where complacency, a lot of the issues arise. Now, internally, we're still in the internal. Organizations internally that are in the destroyer mode, they're doubling down on gimmickry. They have high turnover. They're basically saying, let's look at the math. I'm not even going to deal with trying to do all the right things. I'm just going to make the math work for me. What can I do to make the math work? And I don't care if I have high turnover. And so they chase that. The problem is that they have so much waste. Operations like this eventually will get bought out, sold off, or close and collapse. And that is because they have completely siphoned. They've basically become vampires. The organization, we'll say the ownership, but it could be the team, and it could be all of them. They basically vampired, right? The broader team, hey, I just want a paycheck. Remember this? I just want a paycheck. The ownership, yeah, I just want to make a profit. And the site leaders, yeah, I want to show success. But they put that success in those other two things. They don't actually show actual success. And usually one of those three will get nailed on the destroyer. And then they will end up scapegoating. They'll either scapegoat the team, this is why the high turnover, or they'll get rid of the site leader and say, well, we had a terrible site leader. It's rarely ever one person that is completely responsible for anyone's site struggling. So you don't want to be a destroyed organization. That's internal. But external, what are the impacts? These are pretty obvious. These destroyer organizations are putting out products and service that are hurting customers. This goes beyond just tons of returns and poor quality and frustrated customers. This goes into hazardous, right, unsafe. And you can look back through history in our culture and you can see where massive accidents, massive things have gone wrong because an organization was just there to make the profit. They didn't really have attention to detail, and XYZ went sideways. Sadly, a lot of lives have been lost by organizations who were destroyers. Now, that said, same thing with the sustainers. And why is that? Complacency will get you the same result, right? They may be trying hard, but they're just missing the mark. Why is that? Again, standards are too low. The standards are too low. They're not doing all the right things to the level that they need to. So things will bottom out. They will bounce off of this, but they're just riding barely on that sustainer level. So organizations who want to get out of this destroyer sustainer mode, right? We're 5.5 trillion. Not all of the waste is there, but that's where a majority of it is. And get into this creator mode, seek people like me out to help optimize the organization. The tough part is that HR programs, they don't address the functional, operational things, right? The ERPs and MRPs don't address team dynamics. So you've got this patchwork quilt of tools that don't really do anything. But then they will reach out for tools and techniques and things that they think will be a silver bullet to alleviating their problem. And they'll try it for a while, but then they'll recede right back down into the level that they were. So it'll be a short, a short success, and then right back to the way things were, status quo, right? Because in this level, people don't want to transform. They're not looking to transform. They could care less. I just want my paycheck and go home. I'm not looking to improve anything, and that's just the wrong attitude. Because as we know, like we've said before, you can't transform anything on the outside, right? You can't have growing, thriving lives on the outside if you're not willing to first look inside to do it. And that's really where it's required. So hopefully you got a bit of a snapshot between the person, the team, and the organization today. Keep in mind, there's no hope lost. If you are in an organization like this, yeah, you may say, I'm out of here, right? Because now the light may be flickering and clicking on and going, oh my gosh, I've been in a destroyer organization for how long, or a sustainer for how long? I'm so bored. It's so complete. It's a go nowhere situation, right? And I want to get to here. Well, start shopping because they're out there. There's good organizations who operate in healthy organizational culture versus this unhealthy group, right? Also, though, we have to look at ourselves individually and as teams and say, I can't be in destroyer mode, right? This could be relationships with your peers, anyone in your entire life, for example. Am I in destroyer mode, or am I in just getting through, or am I in creator mode? I want to build positive and build momentum and have some upward swing in life in general. That's where you want to go. So anyway, for this 200th video, hope you're having a fantastic day. Remember, folks, hit that good green domino 3 to 5 times a day or more to uplift, motivate, inspire, and just encourage one another. When we do this, not only are we helping to transform culture, but we're transforming our own lives. And we can't transform anything on the outside if we're not willing to transform on the inside. And that's super important. All right, folks, have a fantastic day. Hit like, share, and subscribe. And until next time, we'll talk to you later.